What makes a melodic line swing? What's the difference between just playing a bunch of notes and something that comes out sounding really soulful? How do great jazz musicians get that feeling in their playing that is just so deep it makes you want to move? A lot of people think that swinging is just a matter of turning your eighth notes into sets of triplets with the first two tied together. But if you've ever tried that, you know that that doesn't work by itself. I'm JQ from jazzpracticeprocess.com, and in this video today, I'm going to show you the basics of how to make your melodic lines swing. Now, just so you know, I'm not going to talk in this video at all about any rhythm section stuff. So I'm not going to talk about a swing drum pattern of any kind, or walking bass lines or accompaniment stuff. So I'm just going to talk about how to swing in melodic lines, okay? So that can be either melodies that you're playing or exercises that you're working on that are continuous lines of eighth notes, which you're probably going to be doing a lot as you practice jazz more and more. So there are three main areas that I'm going to cover in this video, which are going to make the biggest difference for you in the way that your lines sound, okay? So the first area is where you put your accents. The second area has to do with your rhythm and what to pay attention to there. And the third area is how you articulate. So how you define each note and especially the length of each note. So doing these things, and especially doing all three at the same time, takes some practice. So I recommend that you add this to your list of things that you're working on every day, and the more you do, the better you'll sound. Now, if you want to get really deep into what swing is, this video is just going to be scratching the surface, all right? I'm just going to get into the basic stuff, but there's a lot more depth here, and it's absolutely crucial part of learning to play jazz. And as you study the music more and more deeply, and the history and the tradition, you'll start to uncover more of the nuances here. So for now, let's get into it. Okay, so the first area is accents. Now, in classical music, I learned about weak beats and strong beats. Strong beats in classical music, of course, are basically the downbeats, or maybe the beats that are halfway through a measure. So those are usually like in march music or say traditional dance music. That's the beats that are really obvious, where, you really hear the chords are changing on those beats, and that's where you're supposed to step if you're dancing. Well, a lot of jazz is based on the idea of syncopation, which basically means accenting weak beats instead of strong beats. Now, this is a big generalization because there's more to syncopation than just that, such as doing accents in polyrhythms and so on. But the basic idea for this starting level is to accent the offbeats. So by offbeats here, I mean offbeat eighth notes, okay? So you're gonna accent your offbeats, and you're not going to accent your strong beats or your downbeats. And the key, of course, is to do this without losing the rhythm, without getting mixed up of which notes are actually the downbeats. Even though you're accenting the offbeats, hearing in your head that the downbeats, the quieter notes, are where the beats are, if that makes sense. So when you're doing this, it helps a lot to play something really simple like a scale and use a metronome to help you stay grounded. Also really helpful is to start out extremely slowly, or as slowly as you need in order to really nail this part of the rhythm exercise. Okay, so part two has to do with the rhythm. Now, there are kind of two parts to this section: the pocket, or the timing, which we could also call it, as well as the matter of swung eighth notes. So let's start with the issue of swung eighth notes. Now, a lot of people, when they start learning about swing rhythm and how to do it, they are told, okay, you just take each set of 2/8 notes and you turn it into a triplet, pushing the offbeat back a little bit more so that the second of each pair of two happens a little later. But in fact, this isn't the whole story. And I can't argue with the fact that swung eighth notes do mean doing this to your eighth notes, right? Tripletizing them is another term that I would use, but it's not used all the time. When is it used? Only at slower tempos. Okay, so the faster the tempo gets, the less triplety your eighth notes should be. So when you get up to some really fast tempos, your eighth notes really should actually be quite even. If you listen to any fast bebop musicians like Bird or Diz, you're going to hear that they're not tripletizing their eighth notes at all. Now, when you're practicing all of these things that I'm talking about, I would recommend that you practice everything in a very straight eighths style. This is because I have found that it's much easier to take a straight eighth line and add some swing to it than it is to get used to playing with swung eighth notes and then try to straighten those out as you get faster. And take my word for it, when you play swung eighth notes at a very high tempo, it sounds just terrible and it's really hard to iron that back out. Whereas it's much easier to just swing your eighth notes a little bit at slower tempos. So let's talk about the pocket or the timing. Okay, so in jazz, you hear a lot of people talking about playing on different parts of the beat. You hear people say, oh, he's playing on top of the beat or behind the beat. Now, all this means is that someone playing on top of the beat is playing a little bit ahead of the beat, right? They're playing a little bit faster maybe than other people. If you're playing behind the beat, then it means you're sort of lagging slightly behind the other people. What defines the beat? Well, it's basically an agreed upon place that everyone you're playing with together determines is the center of the beat. Now, this is also called the pocket. The pocket, to kind of generalize, is basically that point that defines the beat. And usually, if you have a really good rhythm section, it's going to be that ride cymbal that the drummer's playing, and it's going to line up with the bass player, the bass player's attack. And if the rhythm section has a deep pocket, which you hear people say, that comes from, among other things, the bass player and the drummer really lining up very tightly, rhythmically, especially in those two spots. So that often is one of the main defining factors of where the beat is. So if you're a beginner, it's a very good idea to work on playing in the pocket as much as possible. If you can really line up with the other musicians you're playing with, it's just going to give strength to everything you play if it's rhythmically in the pocket along with the rest of the band. Now, that said, there's another aspect of swinging, which is to play a little bit behind the beat. And mostly you hear horn players or improvisers doing this, often at slower swing tempos, and you can get a particular effect, but it's slightly more advanced. So I'd say maybe wait to try and do that until you can really play rhythmically accurately, and then start looking into playing on different sides of the beat. All right, so the third area that I'm going to talk about is your articulation. Now, basically, when you're playing a continuous line of eighth notes, you want each note in that line to be as long as possible. In other words, you want them to feel connected. You want there not to be any space between those notes as much as you can. So one teacher of mine said, make your notes airtight so nothing can get between them. So this means if you're a horn player and you're tonguing the notes to articulate them, then you have to make your articulation very light in order to keep your tongue from stopping the flow of air. On a guitar or a piano, the technique is a bit different and seems a bit easier to me, probably because I'm not a guitarist or a piano player. I think it's not super simple, but it's slightly different how you achieve it. Now, before I wrap it up, I will just mention briefly about slurs. Now, a lot of people, when they're first taught about how to swing in jazz, they learn the two things, one of which I already mentioned, which is to tripletize your eighth notes. And the other thing that people usually are told early on is slur your offbeat eighth notes to the onbeats. So that's how you make a swing sound. It does happen, and I'm not going to tell you not to do that, but personally, I don't think it's the most important thing. There are a lot of great musicians who don't do that, and they sound amazing. They swing like crazy. But there are also tons of great players in the tradition who do this type of slurring, and it also sounds amazing. So this comes down to who you're studying, what you're trying to achieve with your own sound as you practice and continue honing that. Check it out as part of your study of the music, but again, the other things are really going to make a bigger difference for you faster, sooner. So how do you practice these things? Well, like I mentioned before, it's a good idea to use something really simple that you can already play really well, like a scale, to practice these techniques. And I don't know if you've ever studied Tai Chi before, the martial art. If you've ever seen even anybody doing it, it basically, usually you see people practicing very, very slowly. They're standing there and they're doing these movements, but they're moving extremely slowly. Now, the reason that people are practicing this so slowly is because there are a lot of different details that they are having to focus on all at the same time. So they go extremely slowly to make sure that they're synchronizing all the different parts of their body in the correct ways. So the same goes for this type of exercise. We've got 3 different areas that you're trying to think about and do at the same time. So the only way to do that at first is to slow it way, way down and then make sure that you're incorporating the accents, the rhythm, and the articulation into the phrase that you're playing. It's a good idea to just focus on this and practice it on its own for a while until you start to feel like you can do it easily and you're able to speed up the tempo a little bit and still maintain all of these different aspects of the practice. Once it's feeling easy and natural, then you want to start incorporating it into anything that you're practicing that is continuous eighth notes. So different jazz language that you're working on, make sure you bring this into it while you're practicing it. And the better you get at doing this, the more you'll start to hear it in the music that you're listening to, and you'll start hearing exceptions as well. Now, I've just basically given you the most surface level stuff here, and when you're listening, you'll probably start to notice, oh, this person doesn't really always do this part of it, or the accents are only happening some of the time when I hear this player, or this player is accenting their downbeats sometimes as well. Well, this is where you get into the value of studying the music. So don't take what I've said and just only practice that forever without listening, because you must always listen to the music, study it, and that should be the master key to answer any questions about what to do in this or that situation. The music will always answer those questions for you. All right, so that's it. Basically, if you can get used to accenting all your offbeats, playing deeply in the pocket and knowing when to tripletize or not, and really connecting all your notes together, it's going to improve your sound so much. And in a swing context, you're just going to sound much, much better if you can get used to doing this. I've also written an article on my blog, which I'll leave a link to down below if you'd like to check it out or print it out to refer to. Also, please subscribe to this channel by hitting the subscribe button, and also hit that golden notification bell so that you can be among the first to know when I drop a new video. If you'd like to get periodic emails from me that include beginner jazz resources and articles, then please sign up at jazzpracticeprocess.com. And as always, if I've missed anything or you have any questions or comments, please leave a comment below, and feel free to get in touch with me directly if you have any questions that I might be able to answer and that other people might also have. Please let me know. Thank you, much love, and happy practicing.